Okay, the purpose of this tutorial is to go through the different types of components that are available and give a brief explanation as to what each type does. Okay, so I'm just going to go to my toolbox here and filter by components, and the first category that we have there is inputs. Okay, so the inputs are used whenever you want to write data directly onto the canvas. A lot of the time when you're getting data into the canvas, it will come through the data components from things like noise sources or separating elements or whatever, but you use the inputs when you want to write something directly onto the canvas. So like an octave band there, for example, can be used to enter data directly. So if I just some values in there, so you can see those values now exist on the canvas and I can use those as part of an assessment or something. You can use the tab key on your keyboard to tab through the different octave bands to make inputting the data as quick as possible. There are also things like single figures and things like octave frequencies, so you can take out the octave band center frequency if you're doing calculations that involve either frequency or wavelength or something like that. Okay, the next category are the outputs. So these basically read data that exists on the canvas. You can plug outputs into pretty much any node and they will what's going on. So for example, an octave band read here, you can connect that up and it will show you there. Those are the values that exist at that output node. I can plug that into the octave band frequencies as well, for example, and you can see there that's the values that are being put out by the octave frequency component. You also have a watcher component, so you can watch the output of a specific node. So if I plug that watcher in there and open up the watch window, we can see there that's watching that output. So if I was to change that, so you can see now the watcher has updated that there, so we can see what's going on. You've also got some graphical output, so you can look at the output in the form of a bar graph if you want to, or you can look at it in the form of a line graph if you want to plug in multiple inputs onto the same graph. Okay, so let's get rid of that stuff there. Okay, so that's those are the outputs. The functions are basically the kind of mathematical building blocks that you use when you're creating equations. So for example, you've got like an arithmetic subtract there, or an arithmetic sum for summing values together. If I just get some single figures, I can show you what I mean. So if we connect these two inputs into that sum, and let's say 10 plus pi equals 13.1 there, for example. Okay, that's the basic maths. There are also ones that are particularly useful to sort of acousticians, like log sum there, for example, will carry out a log sum of any inputs that are put into it. There's some other things like log average. We've also got sort of normal kind of trigonometry like sine, cos and tan, and a sine, a cos, a tan, and hyperbolic functions. We've got things like floors and ceilings if you want to do rounding up or rounding down specifically, in addition to things like rounding, normal rounding that is. We've got powers and roots there, that kind of thing. So those really are the kind of the basic mathematical building blocks that you use when you're building up equations or anything like that. We've got flow control is the next category. There's a separate tutorial on those because they're a little bit more involved. We've got data. These are the components that you use to bring data from the data sections of the program onto the canvas. So for example, if you've got noise sources that you want to bring on, this is where you bring your noise sources onto the canvas. If you've got separating elements, you can bring separating elements on using that. Surface finishes, ventilation elements, that kind of thing. Your internal and external receivers also, you can plug noise levels into them, that kind of thing, using the data components. And there are also things like the shaper and lookup table components. So the data ones are all about getting data from the data area of the program onto the canvas. We've got some annotation ones there. The note is used if you want to just put a note on your canvas to remind yourself of something that you did or something like that. and then we've got an info component, and the info component is used to identify containers, to set their name and to give the information about what that container does, but you'll see more about that in the container tutorial. And then finally we've got the analysis. So these are the kind of analysis tools that acoustic consultants will probably find most useful. So for example, you can get a dBA output from an octave band figure or a third octave band figure. You can get like absorption class, or you can get RW, for example, from a spectrum that you input, and things like CTR, DNEW. You can also take like band weightings, for example. So if you were to plug a single figure into the band A weightings component and say that it was, I don't know, 30 dBA, for example, and then look at the output in an octave band read, you'll see those are the figures that correspond to 30 dBA in bands. So it might be easy to look at that as a bar graph, for example. So that's pretty much the components. Like I said, there is a separate tutorial on flow control because those ones are a bit more involved, but hopefully that will give you a good overview of what the general types of components are that exist in sound design.